There's a quiet crisis going on right now that way too few people are talking about. Your money and my money and our money is losing value every single day. And the systems we rely on to build wealth are losing stability even faster. If you've been feeling uneasy about your financial future, even if you're doing everything right, you're not alone. Here's the good news. There's a way to build wealth that actually gets stronger during uncertainty. A way that doesn't rely on Wall Street, the global supply chain, or an electrical grid that seems to fail more often each year. It starts with learning to think in sustainable stores of value. And once you start seeing the world this way, traditional personal finance will feel strangely incomplete. Let's dive in. As I've progressed in my own wealth building journey, especially as someone deeply aware of climate realities and the limits of our current economic system, I've found myself more and more drawn to tangible regenerative forms of wealth. Not just because they're sustainable, though they are, but because they genuinely make my life feel richer, more meaningful, and more connected. It's almost like stepping out of the extractive, soul-sucking economy for a moment and remembering, oh right, wealth can actually be life-giving. What helped me make this mental shift was a concept I first heard about in my permaculture design course. My instructor mentioned that on a farm, a tractor isn't just a tool. It's also a store of value. Since then, I've started doing something similar to what my boyfriend does with cycling. He thinks in bicycle. He plans his trips and his daily life around the assumption that he'll ride, not drive, and calculates the timing of things accordingly. I've started thinking in terms of stores of value, and today I want to help you begin thinking that way too. A store of value is simply an asset that holds its value, or maybe even grows in value over time. Something you can exchange for money later if you need to. Traditional personal finance treats them as a form of diversification or risk management. SoFi puts it this way: the ideal store of value is one that has little risk and can be trusted to stay valuable well into the future. Another way to think about it is that a store of value tends to retain its purchasing power. Some of the classic examples include art and collectibles, precious metals, foreign currencies, and increasingly cryptocurrencies. These are all familiar, but most of them aren't exactly sustainable. We'll get into that in a moment. But first, let's talk about the thing we're taught is a store of value, but increasingly isn't. Conventional wisdom often says that money is a store of value, but some alternative thinkers disagree. Brett Scott, the author of The Heretic's Guide to Global Finance, argues that money is actually a claim on value, not value itself. Jason Mills of The Data-Driven Investor sees money more as a measure rather than a store. I think they both have a point. Because here's the reality. Money is constantly losing value due to inflation. Even modest inflation means that your dollars will buy less next year than they do today. So if your money is always depreciating, then thinking in stores of value, especially non-monetary ones, becomes critical. This doesn't mean that money is useless. It just means that holding all your wealth in financial capital is like trying to store water in a leaky bucket. The goal is to build wealth that withstands economic fluctuations, including climate shocks, far better than a digital number on a screen in the ether ever could. One reason many Westerners don't think in terms of stores of value is that because we've had relatively strong currencies for a long time. In countries with weaker or more volatile currencies, people think in terms of stores of value much more naturally, out of necessity. Jaspreet Singh of Minority Mindset has talked about how in India, women often wear their family's savings as gold jewelry. That's a portable store of value that can't be inflated away. Many Africans store wealth in cattle and goats. In their communities, livestock functions like a savings account and a form of social status and security. And beyond physical assets, other cultures place far more value on social capital. Think family networks, social ties, and mutual support systems. All of these are stores of value, just not the kind Wall Street's ever going to mention. Now we get to the heart of it. Many conventional stores of value, like gold and crypto, are extractive. Mining precious metals is incredibly damaging to ecosystems. And cryptocurrency currently requires staggering amounts of energy. If your vision of true wealth involves living lightly on this planet, well then these won't feel like a good fit. But there are stores of value that instead of being extractive are regenerative, meaning that they help restore, repair, rebuild, and regenerate people and planet instead of harming them. A big part of cultivating stores of value involves a shift towards a regenerative wealth mindset, particularly around how we think about spending money. Instead of spending so much of our money on degenerative assets that will break down more quickly, thus losing their value more quickly, like so much of the junk people buy that all too often ends up in landfills. As much as possible, you want to spend your money on things that are more along the line of assets and investments that benefit you, your community, and the planet. Not the mindless stuff that makes you and everybody else poorer while making those greedy billionaires and corporations richer. Sustainable stores of value run the gamut from smaller, more easily accessible assets you can acquire even if you don't own a home or a property, to those that are more applicable when you own a house or a bit of land, or can think very creatively about how to access them. And because we've been brainwashed by that conventional version of wealth and assets for so long, I imagine most of you are overlooking those because you're not used to thinking this way. So let's start building that muscle by looking at those more readily available examples and progress from there. Most of us are raised to think we need to get educated learning things that will be useful to a future employer. We rarely consider the value of learning useful skills that could help us save and earn money in the future and potentially add a lot of joy and satisfaction to our lives in the process. However, these practical skills are sustainable stores of value as well. The ability to repair a bicycle, grow and preserve specialty foods, restore watersheds, or install a solar panel can produce value and streams of income far beyond the time it took to learn them. Similarly, high-quality tools and equipment like sewing machines, screen printing equipment, beehives, and even musical instruments aren't just objects. They're assets that save money, generate value, and equip you to live more independently and in service to your community. And you don't have to have land to be a beekeeper. A number of successful beekeepers use a hive share model, through which they place their hives on other people's properties in exchange for a share of the honey harvest. So how can you think out of the box in terms of making more of these sustainable stores of value a reality in your own life, even if you live in an apartment? That's what I encourage you to start thinking about. There is a small caveat worth mentioning here. For those tools and equipment to stay a store of value, it's best if they're of high quality and kept well maintained. Japan and Germany, for example, are known for producing exceptional knives because of the metallurgy traditions there. A tractor that's well maintained holds value. A tractor that's rusting in a field doesn't. I'll be honest, maintenance is an area where I can improve. My time and attention gets pulled in other directions, but maintenance is part of wealth stewardship. It protects not only your assets, but your time and your future self. For anyone with entrepreneurial aspirations, starting your own regenerative business can also become a sustainable store of value. Many entrepreneurs reinvest in their businesses because they know a well-run business can be one of the highest return stores of value out there. A regenerative business, be it a certified B Corp, a social enterprise, or a values-aligned small business, doesn't just store value. It creates it, it circulates it, it nourishes community. That's real, true, stable wealth. And let's not forget my favorite unconventional store of value, community. And you can also access this asset no matter where you live. When we contribute to a thriving, reciprocal community, we create a network of support that transcends money. We give and receive. We share resources. We look out for one another. Community is one of the oldest and most resilient forms of wealth humanity has ever known. And we can also create and hold stores of value as a community whether that's a local time bank, a regular community swap meet, a neighborhood tool library, or a co-op grocery store. When you do own a house, you can start thinking about investing in even more stores of value, although some of these you could also invest in as a community. Much of this involves investing in resilience infrastructure. Think water catchment, solar setups, or other energy infrastructure, livestock, food forests, and greenhouses. Some friends I recently visited in rural Florida invested in an electric truck and plan to spend some additional money installing a solar charging station for it at their home. They also invested in 2 tiny homes so that they can explore ways to accommodate visitors to their property as they age. It can also be something as small as seeds, for instance, which were once a primary medium of exchange, a core store of value in many cultures. But even today, they're still wealth. Open pollinated seeds preserve biodiversity, autonomy, and future abundance. I once foraged some delicious passion fruit. Then my boyfriend kept the seeds, potted them up in compost he'd made from food scraps, and eventually sold those seedlings for $15 each. And you don't have to own your own home to dabble in this kind of living capital. I'm sure there are some great examples of people with ingenuity and social capital tapping their networks to find a neighbor, community garden, or church with whom to collaborate to make this kind of thing happen. These aren't just objects, they're all assets that save money, generate value, and equip you to live more independently and in service to your community. I mentioned permaculture earlier and how it sparked a lot of my thinking around these stores of value. It was also through permaculture that I learned about 2 more concepts that are central to my regenerative wealth mindset. The first is the concept of generative assets, durable items that help us become producers instead of consumers. Think cider presses, greenhouses, soap-making supplies, canning equipment, or a camera. These are assets that generate useful products and services, and often income, long after the initial investment. I recently visited Brasa Flora Farm in Central Florida and witnessed how one Brazilian woman has made very strategic investments into canning supplies that make products she can sell to Brazilians in the area who are hungry for a taste of home, like her amazing banana jam. That's the kind of wealth you can feel good about. Then there are procreative assets, natural systems that replicate themselves. Fruit trees are the classic example. They produce fruit and more fruit trees, which produce more fruit, which creates a self-reinforcing loop of abundance. In my own life, these show up in the countless pounds of fruit I've foraged and bartered with or gifted. I'm also planting soap nut trees, which take several years to bear fruit, but will one day provide a completely moneyless way to wash my clothes and give me a product which I can sell or barter with. And my Florida-friendly olive trees may or may not ever bear fruit, but even if they don't, the leaves offer medicinal value that can be turned into income or traded. That's the beauty of procreative assets. They keep giving even when the world feels uncertain. We live in a world where money is becoming increasingly digital. The power grid is increasingly fragile. Inflation chips away at purchasing power, and climate change threatens supply chains and stability. In this world, thinking of wealth only in terms of dollars and bank balances is a recipe for anxiety. But sustainable stores of value, they offer something money can't: resilience, tangibility, connection, and meaning. When you build wealth in regenerative ways through land, skills, community, resilient systems, tools, and living assets, you create a foundation that grounds you. You shift from scarcity to abundance, from fragility to resilience, and from fear to empowerment. Honestly, it just feels better. I find it far more satisfying to make an exchange through my local time bank, to imagine which useful plants I'll grow next season, to build out my online business in ways that help people, instead of staring at a spreadsheet wondering if the stock market will crash. This is not about rejecting money entirely. It's about remembering that money is only one small part of what wealth truly is. And instead of investing it solely in the offerings of Wall Street, we'd be wise to expand our view of wealth, assets, and investments. If you're ready to build more holistic, resilient, and regenerative wealth, the kind that's rooted in real value, not just numbers on a screen, then I'd love to help you get there. My personal economy makeover course is all about how to turn your conventional, fragile personal economy into a regenerative and resilient one, full of sustainable stores of value and a whole lot more. So check out the link for that course in the description below if you want to cultivate more regenerative, values-aligned wealth and think beyond traditional personal finance. Then you can build your future in a way that the planet and your soul can actually sustain. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.